The creators of The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins, and the writers have decided that Matthew is going to be portrayed as on the spectrum of autism. Now, a lot of people over the last few years have either had a major issue with this or they've loved it a lot. But a lot of people have resonated with it overall. We've even seen that because of this, a musician with Asperger's has helped out with the music in season 1 of The Chosen. So today we're going to go through 3 reasons that The Chosen team could think it's at least plausible that Matthew is on the spectrum. First thing up is Matthew's choice of being a tax collector. Tax collectors are very different than we think of them today, especially during the time of Jesus. Matthew would have been ridiculed, hated by his community, and completely outcast. As we saw in season 3 of The Chosen, Matthew chose this position. It wasn't forced upon him, and nobody made him do it. So why would someone go into that position willingly? This would completely ruin his day-to-day life and change how he lives in general. There's only a couple reasons I can think of why someone would even choose to do this, but there are a few clues that we can see in Matthew. One is that he could have been highly proficient in math.
Were you that good with numbers or that bad with Torah?
I was proficient in both.
Counting money and dealing with equations would have been something that he's regularly very good at, especially since he'd be doing taxes all the time. Not only would he have to give Rome their exact tax that they asked for, but he would also skim some off the top, and that means that he would know how much money he's getting as well. Keep in mind, this is during a time when most people are illiterate and math isn't really a subject that's taught like it is today. So for him to take this position, it may give us a clue as to how his mind works. And while Matthew was stealing money from his people, it's most likely that he gave Rome what they needed, as well as accurately taking more above that. So it would have made sense that he knew what he was doing in this position. So it's quite plausible that Matthew was good at being a tax collector and good at doing his job. This gives us more than we know about most of the apostles during the time of Jesus, that he would be some sort of thinker, that he would be intellectual to some extent. In Matthew choosing to be a tax collector, he would have had to have one of two things: either extreme greed, or he would have understood that this is just a position to get him ahead in life. And people on the autism spectrum can often make decisions like this, where they're not really calculating other people's emotions into the equation, but only thinking about how this is going to benefit themselves. Not selfishly or maliciously, but it's just the way that they often think.
Next.
The second reason is the way that Matthew writes his gospel. For example, if we look at all the first chapters of all the Gospels, we see that Matthew writes this really detailed genealogy of Jesus Christ.
Why wouldn't it need to be precise? Mine will be precise.
Yes, I do think that Matthew is writing this genealogy because he's writing primarily to Jews in his gospel, and this would really help them understand who Jesus is as the Messiah. But I do think in general, Matthew's gospel is very detailed, and he does this on purpose. And so the Chosen team really picked up on that, especially Dallas, and they think that this could be a possibility, at least, of him being on the spectrum. Because of these first 2 reasons, the Chosen really decided that Matthew is a facts guy, that he really understands how things are put together and how things work. And lastly, the Chosen team thought that this would be a great way to humanize Matthew. As we've seen throughout all the rest of the seasons so far, and I'm sure into season 4, we're seeing that Matthew is becoming more of this man of God that we see him as in the Gospels and as we see him as later on in church tradition. However, through the course of The Chosen, we're going to have to see this growth over and over again. We saw this primarily in season 3 of The Chosen, where Matthew really has this reconcile arc in episode 2 with his father and his mother. This is a huge step for him because it's showing that he really loves his family. Not that he didn't before, but he really prioritized other things ahead of them. And so us walking through this journey with Matthew really helps us to understand him as a human. The Chosen has to do this with all of the apostles, and in my opinion, I think it's going to be the hardest with Judas, but they've done an amazing job so far. I think in season 4, we're going to begin to see this transformation of Judas from a follower of Christ that's a little bit hesitant to becoming more hesitant and questioning more and more. And obviously the Chosen has done an amazing job at this. Over the past 3 seasons, we've really seen how Matthew has become one of the fan favorites of all of the Chosen fans. Paris Patel has done an amazing job of playing this character and really putting in these unique elements throughout it. It's been really interesting to see. This was something that I was really hesitant on when I first heard about the show. When someone told me about this Chosen show, but told me that Matthew was portrayed as autistic, I thought this was really some sort of like woke agenda moment where they were just trying to add diversity for diversity's sake. But I really think that Dallas, Ryan, and Tyler have done an amazing job of adding in understanding for who Matthew actually is and how he could be represented in this show. Obviously, I'm not the only one that thinks so nowadays. We can look at all of these other examples of how people interact with him. For example, if we put Matthew in a thumbnail in our videos, generally more people respond to it. They're more engaged with that video. And of course, several people have written articles about this as well, as they really resonate with who Matthew is, and they're really excited about this prospect of having someone on the spectrum in this show. And even though this isn't a defining feature of who Matthew is in scripture, and I really don't think it's a defining feature of who Matthew is in the show either, I think this does have a huge impact as to how people see the writing in The Chosen and the direction of the characters in The Chosen and the decisions that are being made. For example, we don't know much about little James, but in season 3, we get to see this amazing moment with him, and it provides explanation as to why God doesn't heal everybody. And that brings clarity to thousands and thousands of people that are going through similar situations. And of course, all of this brings us back to the question that Dallas asks himself all the time throughout The Chosen, and that is this at least plausible? And of course, science has made such leaps and bounds over the last 2,000 years that we understand things in a much different way than the people of the first century would have. There was no understanding of mental health or these different conditions that were going on. So how could we have even known or said that or even conveyed that through scripture?
I really like how it felt relevant, like the mental health issues that she was going through, or what could be seen as mental health issues today.
So yes, it is plausible, although there isn't really any scriptural understanding that would give us proof of this. So either way you land, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, an interesting discussion to be had. Throughout all of the scriptures, think about this. We don't really get any evidence as to who any of these apostles are, other than small snippets and moments. Some of them we have more than others. For example, Peter. We get this understanding that Peter is brash and hard-headed, and he's really, really stubborn. He has this kind of bipolar moments within him where he's really happy at one moment and really mad at the next, and he's really impulsive, jumping to the gun and even slicing someone's ear off. But if you can name me 15 facts about his brother Andrew, I'd be really impressed, because they don't really exist.
Andrew, my little brother whom I love very much.
So through this, of course, it's the writer's job of The Chosen to help us to fill out these characters, make them more human and relatable. Otherwise, you would have a pretty bad show. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, is this plausible? That's kind of where we sit with all of this. And I think, yeah, it's plausible. Is it needed in the show? Probably not. Does it make the show worse? Not really, no. So I think it's a fine point of writing, just like having little James have an injury, or having big James be a really angry, sort of ready to fight the Romans type of guy. It doesn't have a major impact on the show, but it does help us to really flesh out these characters and make them way more relatable and make a good show overall, which is what we want in Christian media. And I know at the end of the day, a lot of you will be against this decision as well, and that's totally fine. You can have your opinion, and very well, you may be right. Matthew may not have been on the spectrum, but I think at the end of all of it, it doesn't impact the show. I don't think it impacts what we're understanding in scripture, and I don't think it impacts salvation either. It's been a while since we've talked about this subject, and never on this channel, so I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure to like if you like this video, and of course subscribe, because we're going to be heading into our season 4 content very soon. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.